This podcast is brought to you by The Pod Tower, hosted by the Watchtower Database. Visit youtube.com/thepodtower for informative, hilarious DC animation-themed podcasts and live streams every week. And check out the Watchtower Database for DCAU video essays, timelines, fan theories, and more. And please, enjoy the show.
Intergang.
We've been at this Watchtower Database is what we've been calling it, the YouTube channel, just covering all the DC animation stuff for the last several years. And of course, we primarily cover the 90s stuff that you worked on. Only your episodes,
the
just
the
Joe Lansdale YouTube channel. Yeah,
we have at least 17 Critters videos.
We do have we have more than zero.
Yeah, that's true.
It has a different reputation.
Honestly, we know, but we love it. So
I love it too. I mean, I don't hate it. I think it was exactly what we meant for it to be.
Yeah.
In that episode, you know, it was just like they let the patients take over the asylum, and and also, you know, it really wasn't part of the Batman the Animated Series. It was a new version, and so it was supposed to have Robin, and it was supposed to, and of course, Batgirl. And it was supposed to have a different tone, a different flavor. And so they sent me the ideas from Steve, I'm having a blank
Gerber.
now. We did Howard Gerber. Yeah. He said he had this storyline. And I said, wow, that's really screwed up. I can't wait. And I jumped into it. And I think all of us were, you know, going for the goal there in the totally opposite end of the Batman the Animated Series.
Oh yeah,
it was a little bit of a send up and a little bit of a nod to the old television show, which is my least favorite version of Batman normally. But I had so much fun with it. I mean, the guy sitting at the table and he looks up and there's a praying mantis. Hey, how you doing?
Yeah, the talking goat sticks with us. It haunts our nightmares. So yeah.
Oh, I laugh at the "there's a bug in your salad" line every time. Yeah. I know it. I know it's coming, and I just
yeah.
The waiter's so happy
that
too.
Stuff. I mean, holy cow!
Right.
We've talked to Matthew Valencia, who played Robin, and the "holy cow" line is one of his favorite lines from the entire series.
Maddie,
Me
don't
too.
you have a cell from that?
Oh yeah.
Yes, I do. I do. Hold on.
Yeah. Show off the cell.
Oh yeah, you do have that.
It's not the right background. I have no clue where the background comes from, but I at least have Robin and the bull.
It's a lot of bull.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're raring to talk about Critters because we will definitely get to that.
Yeah, I love Critters.
Yeah.
You know.
Welcome back, everybody. This is another Watchtower Database exclusive interview. We've been recording a ton of these lately. It feels like we do one of these like every single day, but it's been a lot of fun so far. Today we have Joe R. Lansdale. I got to throw the R in there. Writer and screenwriter of some of your favorite DCAU episodes, including the acclaimed Perchance to Dream from Batman the Animated Series, and of course Critters from the new Batman adventure. So welcome, Joe. Thank you for being here.
Glad to be here.
Did you have a favorite superhero as a kid? You just mentioned that you were not a fan of the Adam West show, so maybe that throws Batman out of the...
No. Well, I was born before that show came along, and I was a big fan of the Batman comics. Yeah. And the Batman's always been my favorite. And when I saw that show, when it first came along, I watched it, and I was a little disappointed because I thought, it didn't capture the comics. And then when I started looking at the comics, I realized it captured them perfectly. It's just that they seemed more real when I was reading it.
Yeah.
But when I was watching it, I thought, well, that stuff's pretty corny. And but I love Batman, and I could always imagine the darker side of Batman in my mind when I was, reading those comics. And of course, Detective Comics existed, and Detective Comics, I think, had a more interesting dark side as you got older. And I think Marvel came along and started pushing DC into a more, adult version, or somewhat adult, at least younger adult version of the superhero characters. But when I was a kid, the first character I loved most was Superman. But as soon as I found Batman, that was it. there was Batman, the Flash, Green Lantern, and Julie Swartz was just creating these with his team. People like Gardner Fox and all those people were, writing for him and taking it from a different angle. Because before that, a lot of the superheroes were magic inspired or influenced, where during that time it was science. And that, of course, was because just after the war, after World War II. So Batman's my man, still is. Yeah, I had a suit, man. I had a suit. It had ears and everything. And I lived in a town about 150, and my dog was going to be Ace. And so, one night I remember I got up the next morning and the bank had been robbed. And I thought, well, damn, nobody set up a bat suit or nothing.
I was right there.
I should have been there.
Failure. I'm not. But what it did is it inspired in me an interest in so many different things, because Batman was an expert in all sorts of things. And I became a martial artist, and I've been one all my life, nearly 60 years or 61 years. I've been a martial artist, and I started studying a variety of esoteric things. And many of those things I didn't learn a damn thing about them, but I tried. And it gave me a curiosity. And so I've always loved Batman for the fact that he set the course for my life. Because when I was 4, before Batman, I wanted to write comics because I was reading the little funny animal comics, as we all call them funny books, Right. All these things were called funny books, not comics. And so I wanted to write those and draw them. And I always tell people I was an exceptional artist. I was, just a genius artist at 4. And at 6, I was that same artist. And at 12, I hadn't changed any. So what I discovered is I couldn't draw, but I could do stories, and I had a knack for telling stories. But I developed that out of comics, so I owe my career to comics and also Classics Illustrated. But DC Comics were always my favorite characters, even though Marvel eclipsed them during the mid '60s. But those Classic Illustrated led to me reading all these different books and short stories. And then you had television, which really was brand new when I was a kid. I mean, it'd been around a long time, but actual programming for TV began in the late 40s. I was born in 51. And a lot of these shows were coming out, and they were showing a lot of old things like Tarzan and stuff like that. And of course, there was a Superman television show. And so all of those things, got me excited. But comics was the first thing to set the fire,
Something that our audience may not be aware of because of the fact that we mainly focus on the animated universe is that you're actually a very accomplished author who's written, plenty of books. You're still writing books. You've been doing them all the way since back through the 80s. And some of these, of course, were 70s. Oh, geez. The earliest I saw on Wikipedia was 80s.
Books were in the 80s. You're right. Books were in the 80s.
So some of this work included a couple of Batman stories before ever going on to work on Batman the Animated Series. I was just saying before we started recording, I read Subway Jack out of this Batman Further Adventures of Batman collection today. And I was curious if you'd want to talk about the process of writing that one for a little bit. Because while I was going through it, it seemed as though some of the passages in it were written as if they were for a comic script. Was it originally supposed to be a comic, or?
No, I always thought I wanted to ring those bells of a comic, though. And I switched around. I think some of it's told in, journals, and I think some of it's told in that sort of comic format where you see the imagery. It was a kind of experimental. I thought, I'm going to try. I was always interested in all kinds of fiction, including experimental fiction. Right. So I thought that this was a chance to do that in something that wasn't commonly thought of as a vehicle for that kind of approach. And I was very satisfied with the results, I will say.
Oh, it's great. It's great. As soon as I finished it, I told the other two, hey, y'all got to track this down and read it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'd love to. Well, I wrote another one I wrote one for the Joker, too.
Oh, yeah?
The Joker, the greatest adventures of the Joker. I forget exactly what the title was, but I wrote one in there called The Joker's Trick or Treat. And it also uses some of this kind of approach and imagery. And plus I wrote a Batman novel called Captured by the Engines, Engines, like car engines. Mm-hmm. And it actually has to do with rear engines, people transforming into cars. And that, it's
ooh, I got to track this down.
I did a children's book. I did a children's book called Terror on the High Sky. So, I did quite a bit of Batman stuff. It's odd that I've never done a Batman comic.
Well, it's never too late to do a Batman comic. I hope you get the chance if that's something you want to do.
I'd love to. I'd love to.
Was it DC that pulled you in for the Batman stories, or was it, I guess whatever random publisher?
When they did that, you remember Martin Gardner and was the editor, I think, on those, and he called me and he knew I was a Batman fan, and he asked me if I wanted to do it, and I said, yeah, I did it. And the story went over so well that they asked me to do the other one. And somewhere in there, I don't remember if I did before or after I wrote the novel, and then I wrote the children's book. And of course, I did Jonah Hex comics and I did all kinds of comics, but I did Lone Ranger for Topps with all those with Tim Truman. And I did Conan comics for Dark Horse, and good grief, I've read so many comics. There was even a Joe Lansdale's By Bizarre Hands comics from Dark Horse, a series based on my stories, and I didn't write any of those. They were just all based on my work. Wow. And then it moved to Avatar, and then there's a new comic bunch coming out now based on my short stories and stuff. So, and they even did comics based on my book characters. Happened Leonard, which was a TV show. It's on Netflix right now, but it was 3 seasons on Sundance before that. So, they've been done into comics too. So comics have always been a big part of my life.
It is kind of funny that to us, you're the guy that wrote Critters, and now we're finding out all these like many, many, many other things. Like, I got to read this. I got to read.
So, Read My Lips is my favorite of the Batman that I wrote.
We'll definitely get to that.
For sure.
We'll get into that one too. Yeah. I want to ask real quick. I did a little bit of. Obviously, we didn't do enough research, but I did a little bit of research. I finally got around to watching Bubba Ho-Tep last night. And
Me too, today.
I had so much fun with it. We want to ask you, I guess, what draws you towards writing about these strange and surreal sort of concepts? Like, for instance, Bubba Ho-Tep, for people who don't know, is about Elvis and JFK battling an ancient Egyptian mummy in a nursing home. And it became a movie in 2002 starring the legendary Bruce Campbell.
It's also got a lot of comics now.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, tell us about the surrealism. What draws you to that?
It was originally a story that I wrote. I'd wanted to write a mummy story. I'd always liked mummy movies, when I was a kid. And I thought it would be kind of fun to do one. And I thought, he'd be a Bubba Ho-Tep if I wrote it, because I'm from East Texas, and I thought that'll be a Bubba Ho-Tep story. And I was just laughing about that. I wasn't serious. But then I was asked to do a Elvis is Dead story, which was an anthology. And there were a bunch of us that did it. I mean, a real mixture of different kinds of writers. And I wrote Bubba Ho-Tep because I'd always been interested in not only the mummies, but Elvis. I'm a big Elvis fan. And my brother is 17 years older than me, and he recorded at Sun Studios unsuccessfly. But he had met Elvis because he married a lady who graduated with Elvis. And so she knew him. And so, they knew each other in passing anyway. And then JFK was assassinated during my childhood, which was a traumatic moment. It's like that's when the gate opened and everything started kind of leaking in, from this alternate horrible universe. And we just thought that was happening then, And so all that was in my mind, and my mother had a car accident, which put her in a rest home. And so I spent a lot of time there because she had to have 24/7 care and all that, and had to have nurses and people who knew what they were doing. So when I was there, I would go to visit her, and I would stay during the day, and I would listen to people talk, and I would watch and observe, and all of that stuff. When they said, "Would you like to do this story? Elvis is Dead," came, and I wrote Bubba Ho-Tep. So I wrote it very quickly, and I used some experimental style in it too. In that story, it's very strange. And I sent it in, and I got to thinking, well, now that is pretty damn weird. And I didn't think I would withdraw it. I thought I'll withdraw it. That thing's too crazy. And my back then we did letters. We didn't do email. And a letter got to me before I could send mine that said that was her favorite in the book. And so it began to seem a whole lot better to me after that.
Oh, yeah. I bet. Yeah,
dude, now it's a cult classic.
It's been on my radar for forever, but I just watched it for the first time today. And of course, the one question.
You lucky boy.
I know. I'm a Bubba Ho-Tep indoctrinated now.
Hey, me too.
When Bruce was doing the movie with Ozzy,
yeah.
he said that he was sitting there with Ozzy, and he said, "Ozzy, what are you doing in this movie?"
Yeah,
this is my kind of movie.
He's great.
I like the script. He always had that big voice. I like the script, and he wanted to change asshole to arsehole. And he asked me permission, and I couldn't really get permission. That was Don Pasquarelli's dad. He said, I said, man, it's fine with me, and I'm sure it will be with you.
Yeah. In your mind, for either the story or the movie, is Bruce Campbell actually Elvis, or is he the Elvis impersonator?
I'll leave that up to the audience.
I knew you would. Yeah.
Or is he Elvis? Is he Elvis Presley?
Yeah, it's better without an answer.
I saw Bruce on I saw it on the video. He was at a premiere of the new Elvis movie.
Oh, yeah.
And they came out and they asked him what he thought of it, and he said, well, the boy tried, didn't he? He really tried.
People were getting so upset about Bruce's responses to questions about that movie. They kept calling him like God, what was it? I'm trying to remember, like self-centered or something like that, washed up and all that. Jealous. And I was just like, you guys do not understand Bruce Campbell's humor at all. He's cutting jokes. He's not being serious.
Yeah, no, he was. He might have been.
There's a chance, yeah.
He's my favorite Elvis. He really is, and I love Bruce. He's a really good guy, and Don and I. Of course, I only got to meet Ozzy that one time. He didn't live much longer after that. Mm-hmm. But I was wearing my Bubba Ho-Tep T-shirt once. I was in Italy. Our daughter's a professional singer and songwriter, and she was over there performing, and she was performing with different people, and one of them was Guy Davis. And he came over and he saw my T-shirt. He said, "Oh, I love my dad in that." I thought, "Oh, Guy Davis, this is Ozzy's son." And so I want to get a picture, and he took a picture of me to send to his mom. And of course she's a famous actress too, and I'm also deceased.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd mentioned the movie was on my radar for a while. I didn't realize that Bruce Campbell was Elvis in the movie, because I start up the movie and the first line is, and it's so, even with the twang, it's so recognizable as Bruce Campbell's voice, and I just went, oh man, why didn't I know this is Bruce Campbell?
Because it seems you're not paying close enough attention to Joe Lansdale on Twitter.com.
Exactly, yeah, apparently.
There you go.
2019
I've been following
tweets,
for years. I haven't seen the movie, and I knew that.
Well, there you go. Yeah, there are wise people amongst us.
So all the books and stories that you've written over the years, Bruce Timm's actually stated that you're one of his favorite authors. Was he familiar with your work before Batman?
I love Bruce. No, I knew his work. I actually have a cover on my wall of that he did for me long before he was doing Batman the Animated Series. And it was for a story of mine called The Job, but it had an Elvis impersonator in that story. So he drew an Elvis with a knife.
Oh, sweet.
And it was, I forget the name of the little magazine that it was in. It was a small magazine. And I also have a Batman, framed Batman that's signed by him. Or maybe I framed it, but he sent it to me. And I've had that for years. It got in a flood. I thought it was ruined, but they were able to fix it.
Oh, good.
And then we wrote a comic called Red Romance that was so upsetting to people that it was originally supposed to be in a weird romance thing, and they made us take it out and put it in Flinch magazine Flinch Comics.
I read that. I have a copy of that one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that upset a lot of people, which I kind of meant to. Yeah. And the thing is that when I saw Bruce, he said I should have known better. I was going to get in trouble working with Joe.
So you guys worked together before?
Well, we worked together on Rocketeer comic, in that he had me write a little short story that he did spot illustrations for, and that was fun. I'd love to work with Bruce again.
Yeah. We'll get Critters 2 going anytime, I'm sure.
Getting into Batman the Animated Series, Perchance to Dream is a fan favorite episode, with the late, great Kevin Conroy having publicly held it as one of his favorites for, going all the way
Batman,
back.
the greatest Batman.
Absolutely.
Could you walk us through the process of writing the teleplay for that one and what it is you think elevates that episode to being one of the best?
I know you're biased, probably.
Well, what they did is they had ideas and they would sort of pick writers they thought could, might be able to handle that idea. And so they had a general plot line laid out and they sent it to me to see if I was interested and to try it and see if I could do it. And they were very, very pleased with what I did. And the great thing is that they gave you enough that you followed so you could stay within the context of the show and their particular take on Batman, but you could go different directions. You could do other things as long as you didn't get outside of that story and Batman perimeter.
Right.
So I got to just kind of go crazy, and I tried to write scripts that were fun to read. Most scripts you read, they aren't worth a damn. I mean, they're not, even if they're good, they're going to play well. They aren't fun to read. And I try to write scripts that are fun to read. And so when I wrote that one, there's a lot of asides that the viewer will never see that I wrote to the people in a way. And what I did with the ones that the first three that I did in particular, I sort of wrote them in a pre-directed manner, meaning instead of it being the common screenplay or script, I wrote it as if I were directing it. So I gave more directions than you're normally supposed to do when you write scripts because the directors hate it. But I thought, well, screw them, I'm doing it anyway because I've always wanted to give that a shot. And so I did it, but they were very kind and they shot these things almost like I wrote them. And when they made changes, they were smart changes and, maybe better than what I had or better than my approach. But it was fun to do, my all-time favorite though was Read My Lips. That's my favorite. Although I understand why people like this one. I think it's got so many clever things like in it, like not being able to read in a dream, which is just something they made up. Yeah. And I just followed that. So, okay, we'll play with that. I don't think that's true.
I don't know.
Yeah.
If you try to look at your phone in a dream, it's not going to work.
I was watching something else that did the you can't read in a dream recently, and I was just like, really? I was just like, it's Joe.
They
it's
probably
Joe.
stole it from that script.
maybe it's become.
Yeah, no, I don't know if that's true or not, but we had that in there. But one of the things when I wrote it, I was very much in the mood of noir movies and things like that. And I think they had a little bit of Vertigo in mind.
Oh yeah.
When I first wrote it, I had him jump off of the tower.
Right.
And Michael Reeves, who was my great editor over there, who I love the guy to death, a great guy. He said, you know what? They're kicking back on it. And I said, what do you mean? He said, they don't want to show Batman jump, even though it does turn out he's in a dream. They don't want children to think to jump off of, something like that. In other words, stupid children.
Right.
And so I said, well, okay, what do you got in mind? And so they came up with this idea of doing that kind of Vertigo thing where the impressions of falling were, color and surrealism and stuff like that, which I thought was smart, And because I don't think kids are as stupid as they when I was a kid, the Three Stooges were hitting each other in the head with a hammer. I thought maybe I'll not hit myself in the head with that.
And he wakes up, he goes from falling off the tower and wakes up in bed. And that's we've all had the fall and wake up dreams before.
Yeah.
Was there anything else that didn't make the final cut that you could think of?
I don't remember anything else. Maybe somebody else would, but I don't remember anything else. I remember being really content working for that period of Batman. I thought it was a great opportunity. My favorite comic character, one of my favorite characters, period. Mm-hmm. And I thought that their take on it was the best Batman of all. And I thought Kevin Conroy was amazing. And he always said that was his favorite episode.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I was very pleased with that, and I think it's a powerful episode, but I'll tell you other things. You had the Roddy McDowell, you had that great actor along with Kevin and others, because they dropped in some really fine actors in these things, and so there were so many things working in my favor, as well as writing a script I thought was pretty damn good. But I also had all these great things working in my favor, and the artist and the way they put it together, and Michael Reeves. So it, when they got an Emmy, we didn't get an Emmy, but they all sent us a recognition that we were part of that of that Emmy.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, yeah, that's pretty good. That's nice that you did that. I wrote the goddamn Emmy. We were all happy to be part of that series. I'm joking. It was so much fun.
Yeah.
And to know that you contributed to it being an Emmy.
Yeah.
I was going to say one more thing about that episode. I think that it appeals to people. It's that feeling that a lot of people have. I never really had it, but I've talked to many people that saw that and it's always felt like their life wasn't the one they were meant to live, which I thought was interesting, that there are a lot of people who feel that way, or that it's sort of like being born and those aren't my real parents, that people have that. It's kind of a thing with a lot of people that am I adopted? These don't seem like my real parents. There were all sorts of little touchstones like that I think hit with a lot of people that were unexpected to me.
During the scene where Selena comes to Bruce's office, she has a line that goes, "Your mother called, darling, and said you could use some cheering up. And who better for the job than the woman you're marrying next week?" As she's delivering that line, she somewhat suggestively begins taking her glove off. Was that something you put in the script, or were they trying to imply something on the storyboards there?
I don't remember if I put it in the script or if they had it and wanted it in the script. I don't remember. But it was suggestive. Yeah, that would cheer me up.
In walked Catwoman.
That was one while I was watching it back the
Yeah.
other day. I was just like, wait, that got past the censors?
Yeah, it was very, very interesting.
Yeah, a lot of things got past. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that we have like just the smallest amount of confirmation on that now, because it's just kind of been cycling through the fan base for a while of like, is that what I think it is?
Well, I saw that it was there when I saw it. I don't remember if I had anything to do with it.
Okay, yeah. Well, here's another very specific Perchance to Dream question for you. This is also kind of just a running gag about the episode, is that in the dream, there's a part where Bruce goes into like a store and buys he buys all the equipment that he uses to climb the bell tower at the end of the episode. And part of it is he runs in and he slams money down on the counter and he goes, "I need a flare gun and some flares." And then he never uses those. Did you have any idea of what he wanted the flares for?
I do not, and I don't know. That might have been my fault. I might have put it there and thought, I'm going to use a damn flare gun.
Flare gun.
It makes sense that he would like notify Batman with that or something, but he just never uses it. Yeah,
I don't know. I have no idea. I don't. It's been a long time since I've looked at it.
For sure.
Too.
Yeah.
But no, I don't. There may have been a purpose in my mind, and I just forgot it. I thought I'm going to do a flare gun. It'll be so cool. And then at the end of it, what flare gun? I don't know. I don't know.
He jumped off the tower before he had the chance. Yeah, I don't know.
For me, it just seemed like it was to get him in a place where there would be cops nearby.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he just says it so forcefully and demanding that it's just like...
I'll take a flare gun, a pack of rubbers, and
and he never used the condoms.
So, moving on to what you've said is your favorite episode that you wrote. You wrote the teleplay for Ventriloquist debut episode, Read My Lips. We're curious, how do you view the relationship between the ventriloquist and Scarface? Some comics have gone in a more supernatural angle. Was that, is that what you were going for, or was it all in the ventriloquist's head?
I thought of it in the ventriloquist's mind, but I also thought that he might have created some link that was actually there, but I didn't think of it as supernatural. I thought of it as, science fantasy in a sense, but I love that one because I think that this poor guy who is like kind of a nobody in many ways could be a somebody, at least from the standpoint of being a tough guy and running a gang by using this, dummy. And it was also, I thought I wanted to play outside of, the big dumb guy, Rhino, I think it was. Wasn't that the guy who was? Yeah. I just thought it was kind of interesting that they just went with it. The guys working with him go, oh, what the hell? This works. We're getting, we're robbing the stuff. It's working. The thing that bothered me most about that episode, and I know it's kind of stupid, but it's when he has all the platinum stuff fall on him and they just like get it off of him and put him in the boat.
Yeah.
I can't think of, why. I didn't write it that way. I wrote it in such a way where that wouldn't happen because I thought that was a little too far. I mean, he's a blob of paint, as Michael used to always say. But I thought, why not have him push a few of them off on him and bang him in the head or something? Yeah. But that always bothered me because it would have crushed him like a bug. But I think the thing for me was the dialogue. I had so much fun with, and I wrote it in such a way as like the old 40s, noir films and gangster films, and I just had so much fun doing kind of an Edward G. Robinson approach. That kind of thing. And the guy that played him,
George Zunza,
yeah, he was just perfect. He nailed all that. And again, I got the good cast, and I just loved the idea of having the mannequins in there. And I thought, well, I'll play with this idea of mannequins. So they let me do a lot of stuff I wanted to do. I always laugh when I see it, and Batman swings by the rope.
Yeah,
and the next thing he knows, he's in there with the ventriloquist in the bed, and the dummy's eyes open.
Right?
What happened there? No, I did that. I did that myself. I wrote that, but I kept wondering. When I did it, I just felt like I had to do it. But was the ventriloquist really awake like the dummy? And he popped that open, but he's seeing it through the dummy's mind, not his own, And I did a couple of things like that, and I can't remember the other one, but I thought I would play with that idea that he couldn't always respond as who he was, even if he was aware, because his consciousness, if it wasn't directed at him, it was directed at the dummy, and so it was a response to the dummy.
Yeah, they never like overlap, of course, or are acting at the same time. Yeah, I do love all there's at least I think 3 different references to I'm walking here, but it's always like, I'm talking here, I'm doing this thing here. Like there's so many of them.
I'm sleeping here.
I'm sleeping here.
And I just love the prima notion. When I was writing that, I thought I'm going to change that. I think it'd be funny if you said something like prima notion.
Yeah.
This is a premonition.
Don't correct him. Yeah.
Yeah, don't correct him. He's dangerous.
we do understand that you got some of the ideas for the episode from a Twilight Zone episode, The Dummy, and then there's a 40s.
Yeah, there was some of that, and I think that's why it maybe feels a little supernatural at times. Yeah. There was also a Gerald Kirsch story called The Horrible Dummy. That was something of an inspiration. And then there was the Twilight, I guess it was a Twilight Zone episode where the dummy is actually the ventriloquist, And so they already had the character there, but a lot of that stuff gave me the tone and that feeling of, things aren't quite right here, and it was fun to play with that. But there were influences, and the greatest ones actually were from gangster and noir films, though.
Yeah.
And they played it that way. They used the coloring of noir, and they had that whole tonality that noir has with shadows. So I enjoyed that a lot because I love that stuff, and I've written a lot of things like that.
The Scarface fits very well into that gangster 40s BTAS aesthetic.
Right.
Yeah. Did you? I'm tossing one more thing that I'm thinking of is the ventriloquist himself. That character was pretty new to comics at the time that you guys were writing that episode. Was that because I know that there's been instances with like Bane and other characters where there was hesitance to use newer characters. You wanted to pull more from older stuff. What was the kind of the trials and tribulations of getting the ventriloquist in there?
I wasn't aware that there was a ventriloquist character until that moment. And,
okay.
And I don't know if he was in comics. Was he in comics first, or did he?
I think it was just a couple in the 80s that weren't super, high profile or anything.
No, I was, even though I was a Batman fan, I didn't read all the issues and stuff. In the 80s, I got away from comics until about the end of the 80s. Mm-hmm. And then I picked back up him through the 90s and stuff. But I had gotten away from reading them. I would occasionally pick a specific issue, so I didn't really know anything about the ventriloquist other than, that they had this story about this guy. And I said, okay, what can I do with this? So, and I really think that a lot of the stuff I did in that has led to how the ventriloquist has been represented in other ways.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So another fun episode you did was Showdown, which was mostly the flashback episode pitting Ra's al Ghul against Jonah Hex. And we've heard you speak before on the Batman, the animated podcast, about having pitched multiple versions of the story before they actually went with the one that got produced. So could you go into some details about like what some of the early versions might have looked like differently?
I don't remember pitching a specific episode. I think I pitched different ways to look at Hex and some of the other stuff. But I don't remember a lot about it. I just remembered that they picked me because I had written Jonah Hex comics and they thought I would be good for that. And I was also, a Southerner, and he's a Southerner in the comic books. And I love that character. But I did have some things. I guess I've forgotten that. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I do remember that I loved writing that script too. I always thought Jonah Hex was a funny and yet sort of sad, character. And I loved writing dialogue for him. And I had written 3 with Tim Truman doing the art. I had written 3, I guess what you would call miniseries. What we used to call them back then. So I had written these 3. So I knew Jonah Hex. I felt very comfortable with that. And but the thing that was interesting was that it was framed by Batman, but it's not really a Batman episode at all.
Yeah,
it's just stuff that happens. In between the Batman bookends.
Makes it stand out though.
But I don't remember the other. I don't remember what context that was in. That sounds somewhat wrong.
I remember always feeling excited to watch the episode because there was always, for me, I had a special place in my heart for any ones I considered to have a guest star. So like Jonah Hex, he's, another comic book character who popped up in the show. And I always thought those episodes were a little more special.
Oh, I loved him. I loved him. My heart's all aflutter.
Yeah.
When he had the Bowie knife. And I always liked, that character in my head. And, Elizabeth Montgomery, who in my era was a very famous television actress primarily. And she did, some made-for-television movies. And I don't know if she was ever in films or not, but it was great to, have her voice there. And it was sad that was her very last. Right. She died of, I think, cancer of some sort. Mm-hmm. But, I was always a big fan of her. And so it was really cool to have her doing that voice of the barmaid,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's funny thinking about, with your other experiences on the show that you got the Jonah Hex episode, considering, I don't know if you've ever caught, in the same continuity later, the Justice League Unlimited show brought Jonah Hex back with some other Old West characters. And I love, They don't say like any reference at all to the Showdown episode other than just him being there, but he has a line where he sees Batman's, much more futuristic looking utility belt. And he's like, I have a feeling you guys are time travelers. And Batman's like, what would give you a crazy idea like that? And he just goes, I've had an interesting life. So it's just, that's the only little snippet of yep.
Yeah. They approached me about writing for Justice League Unlimited, not specifically Jonah Hex, but I just didn't have time. I was doing something else, so I didn't have time. They wanted me to create some ideas.
Oh, okay.
And I just didn't have time to do it. They also approached me and asked me about Batman Beyond. And I said, yeah, I'm interested. They never got back to me.
Oh, no. That seems like a
no.
perfect place. They got spliced animal people everywhere.
They had the Sarah Stone dog, which is nothing if not critters on steroids.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go. Yeah. I would have loved to have done both. I loved both those series a lot. And Batman Beyond is an extremely interesting, underrated series, even though it's got its fandom. It's still underrated, I was surprised at how much I liked it. When it first came along, I thought, I don't know, but they'd asked me about it before it came on. And I said, well, yeah, I'm interested. I'll be glad to talk to you. I think I was leaving for Europe or something. And so, when I got back, by that time, either they had forgot or I had forgot. We both forgot. So I never heard any more from it, but I would have loved to have worked on that series.
Yeah.
Back on Showdown, perhaps one of the most interesting things about Are we calling him Raze or Rosh?
Raish.
Raish? Okay.
That's how the episode called.
Yeah.
Rosh. I go with Rosh.
Raz.
Perhaps one of the most interesting things about Raish as a villain is that compared to someone like the Penguin or the Joker, he's got seemingly noble aims. For instance, in this episode, he's concerned about the damage that the United States westward expansion is having on the land. And then that concern is compounded even more when you hear the governor talking about it now becoming a civilized land, sort of reminding you that there were indigenous people being uprooted from those areas. However, he remains a villain in that he believes he's the only one who knows the right way to fix the problems, casualties be damned. In some ways, this ego serves as a great foil for Batman, but were there any complications that came about when trying to map that conflict on another hero, Jonah Hex?
I don't remember thinking about it from Jonah's standpoint much. I just felt like I knew that character, and I felt like that he was much more of a specific moment sort of guy.
Yeah.
You know, you're doing this to me now, or I'm doing this to you now. And the other thing was that there was a very Jules Verne creation. You know, this there is a Jules Verne novel. It's really 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea in the air. And he had a villain who, was trying to save the world then. He was doing the same thing. That was really what they did. They just took that character and sort of revamped him with a Ra's al Ghul, you know. But it was all about this guy, and I kept looking at it, and I was kind of on his side, you know. But I kept thinking, well, this isn't the right way to do it, you know. I don't think this is the way to go about it. But I never really felt like there was any conflict with doing Hex. But it was fun to do somebody that was more shaded, the villain, because he is shaded, and he even cares about his son. In the end, he comes and gets him, even though he knows his son is not a good guy. And it's funny because Ra's al Ghul is not really a good guy either, but comparatively, he's the hero of the piece almost, you know,
Right.
and outside of Hex, no. At least from the standpoint of how he was trying to deal with the environment and how he was trying to also take care of his son, but he was willing to let his son be somewhat sacrificed and by it being in that home and aging and all that, because he was not a good person.
Yeah. There's a bunch of there's so much fun stuff in that episode. It's overlooked, I think, because of the, you know, it's framed within a Batman episode, but is sort of barely a Batman episode.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's funny because Read My Lips is my favorite. Actually, Showdown is my second favorite.
Yeah.
Then Chance to Dream, and then The Wonderful Critters.
Yes. Oh, that shoots to the top now.
One of the things they did that was kind of fun, and I especially think of Read My Lips and to some extent the Jonah Hex, when you had the Batman and Robin scenes, is that since I was a martial artist and so was Michael, that they let me write that stuff pretty much more like real martial arts.
Yeah.
And then once in a while, you know, they had to do the TV or movie martial arts, but some of that stuff was done almost verbatim the way I wrote it.
Yeah.
Especially in Read My Lips with the boxing, because I've done all that. I've been a boxer. I've done all that.
Yeah.
You know, it was really fun that when I saw it, they had followed the directions I had written, which were simple, but I thought, hey, you know, it is like I'm directing that piece. It's very fun.
It's always interesting to see, you know, folks like yourself or someone else that has no knowledge at all of martial arts on whether, like, who's in control of the episode. Like, for instance, the Mask of the Phantasm movie, he's outside doing what he says is jujitsu, but it's not jujitsu at all. Meanwhile, you've got your episode. There's also another episode where he disarms someone's shotgun by just doing like a weird little backflip and kicking it out of his hands, and just stuff like that. That's very like, okay, so whoever wrote this one,
you know, once in a while, I would do the realistic stuff, and then they would do something that wasn't, and I would, you know, I thought, ooh. But, you know, it is a cartoon, and, and it is animated, and it's, you know, they're doing things that are outrageous anyway. You know, so I think that maybe you can carry that too far, but I think that you're supposed to give some sense of reality to it. And I think when Michael and I both being martial artists, I think we were both somewhat inclined to lean in that direction, and it was great to see it in those two particular episodes.
Yeah,
that makes sense. If you've got the language, and you might as well. Clarify.
I know we're sticking on Jonah Hex. I did remember a read my lips thing that I was hoping to ask you that I forgot to add in here was there's a bit at the end where Batman does actual ventriloquism himself to trick the gang into turning on him and everything.
It was Zatara, yeah.
Yeah, was that your idea, or was that whoever wrote the outline for the episode?
I don't remember. I honestly don't. I was very much aware of that, so I knew that we were going to have Batman do ventriloquism at some point.
It was
I just thought that had to happen.
Yeah.
So but I don't remember.
Yeah,
I honestly don't remember.
Cool
I don't
Easter
want to
egg.
lie.
Yeah, the only reason why I brought it up was why I was wondering, whose idea was just because it's referenced earlier in the episode that he learns that from Zatara the magician, which is a callback to a different episode. It's kind of one of those things of how Batman the Animated Series out of all these shows is notably the one with the least amount of interconnectivity. It's very not non-serialized. So yeah, just that kind of thing.
I had maybe Zatara was taking off her glove too.
Oh no! There you go. There's my answer. Yeah. All right. Anyway.
Okay. So back on the Jonah Hex questions, jumping to the future a bit. You also wrote the Jonah Hex DC Showcase short.
I did. I forgot that. Yeah.
By that time, you'd had a decent few comic runs with the character under your belt, but this was adapted from a story by Justin Gray, Jimmy Palmiotti, and Phil Noto, who were the current team on the Jonah Hex comics. So what was it like working on this one and marrying your vision of the character to theirs?
I just had the comic episode. I mean, it wasn't a long one, as I recall. It was just like a short episode of Jonah Hex, and they gave me the comic or a copy of it, and I just read it and adapted it. I think that was pretty much it. The other thing I was pissed about in that was they kept having people get on the horse from the right side. They don't do that.
Yeah.
They were trained to mount from the left. And it wasn't that they couldn't be mounted from the right, but they didn't like it because they were trained from the left. And it was such a common thing. And that drives me crazy when I see it in modern Westerns.
Right.
And because it's just it's incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
It's anachronism. And like I say, it's not that they couldn't do it. I mean, Roy Rogers and Gene Autry all had trick horses that you could, you can mount them from the rear. And when I say that, I want you to not think that.
I will edit just that little bit.
From the rear. Yes. Yeah. Like he carried a milking stool with him. Well, no, we're
titling this interview, Joe Lansdale teaches us how to mount horses from the rear, just to get the
the horse pedigree.
I really like that short. And what was funny is that they liked it so much they flew me and my wife out to the the big comic convention in San Diego.
Oh, cool, yeah.
And,
Nice.
Yeah, we got to go out there for what is that thing, 10, 15 minutes?
Right, yeah.
That's great, though.
Hey, free vacation.
Yeah, I loved writing that, and it was a lot, and Thomas Jane was great as Hex, and so we went out there. I think I was on a panel with him and some of the other people,
I didn't realize that was Thomas Jane.
Peripherally. Yeah, I knew him peripherally from my daughter had introduced me to him because she knew the artist or something. But obviously I didn't know him well, but there was almost a period when he played Hap Collins in the TV show, which in fact ended up being James Purefoy, who was fantastic in it. But I just think there was another connection there. There's all these, it's funny how all these people in this industry at some point intersect.
Yeah.
It seems like, anyway, at least a lot of us, we intersect.
It's like there's 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon or something.
Something like that.
Yeah, that's exactly like that.
Well, that same year that you did the DC Showcase short, your 1993 story, Two Gun Mojo, was given the motion comic book adaptation. So how closely were you involved with that? And what was your reaction when you heard that it was given new life like that?
My involvement was, hey, there's a motion version of your comic. What?
That's it. That's still pretty cool, though.
Still cool. Yeah.
It was cool.
So you wrote on one Superman episode with Bob Goodman, the Identity Crisis, the Bizarro episode. You
Right.
talked about you weren't involved with Superman as much because he wasn't like as near and dear to your heart as Batman was.
Right.
Did you
Right.
have any other? The question we have is, could you clue us into what your original vision for this episode was? I'm not sure if we had prior knowledge to anything about that.
Well, the truth of the matter is they sent me I think somebody had already done a script, and they sent me the outline. I don't think they sent me the script. I don't remember, but they had already had, and they weren't content with that. So I did a script, and they weren't content with mine either. So they brought somebody else in to do the script, and I got credit for the plot line. So pretty much the plot line, that the general plot line that they offered me is the general plot line I developed, and I developed it more than, of course, what they had given me, because I actually did a complete script. But there was something about it that didn't appeal to them, and I actually thought the other script was better than mine. I was I could see why they would have him do it, because he did a good job, and I think probably mine was just off a hair because I hadn't quite got into that Superman frame of mine. I wished I had, because I would like to have done more Superman too. I'd really love to have written something in Justice League, the animation there, because I really love the Flash and all those things. But I think probably I was just a hair off, and I think that I just never could quite, I was a bubble off the plum, so to speak.
Maybe as one of the,
but the general storyline I think I laid out was good, and that's why I got story credit.
Yeah.
So they had an idea. I developed the idea. Another guy came along and did it better than I did.
Okay. Well, I guess now's the time. It's Critters time!
It's Critters time.
So this is a pretty infamous episode, but it's always been one that I've adored for just being as out there as it is.
Yeah.
To the point where Bruce Timm is on the record having said he thought Steve Gerber's outline was literally making fun of Batman. Were those concerns?
It was.
were those concerns were expressed to you during the pitch, I assume?
I don't remember that being expressed to me. I remember them saying, "Can you do something with this?" And I thought, yeah, I like what he did. I liked his general approach. And so he had an idea, he had an approach that he was going for. And they gave me those characters because I used to be a farmer. I did all sorts of things like that. I was, had a goat dairy, my wife and I did. And so, I knew farm people. I grew up with them. So to get the Farmer Brown and this sort of Daisy May character, which is what she was very much like the old, what was the Al Cap, comics that he used to do. And so I had a great time with it, and I liked writing his dialogue. And I actually think Farmer Brown was fun. I wish they'd have brought him back at some point.
Oh yeah.
And it was a goofy episode, and it did make kind of fun of Batman, but let me restate that. I don't think it made fun of Batman so much as it made fun of Batman in the same way that the old TV show did. It was sort of a loving camp approach. And I don't think we quite dialed it back that far. It wasn't absolute camp, but it certainly had elements of it, And when I wrote it, we wanted to make it distinct from Batman the Animated Series. It's like usual. You have something good, and the producers and stuff. So how can we pour about a quart of piss in this? And that's exactly what happened. So I think for me, I thought, okay, if you're going to do this and make it less than what's before, I'm going to turn it into something good, but it is going to be a parody of what you're looking for.
Yeah. And
so that was a lot of it. It was a loving parody though. I love Batman. I loved all of the stuff, and Batgirl was fun to write about, and Farmer Brown. And I wish somebody would say, "Hey man, why don't you do a Farmer Brown Batman episode again, or write a comic with them?" Because Farmer Brown to me was funny, and that silo idea, I just kind of developed that off of their general suggestion, and I thought, well, it'd be funny if we really just make this kind of just way out there. They're farmers, but they're really way far ahead as far as this kind of scientific research that they're doing to make animals bigger.
It's probably the only Batman episode where you see a background with blue skies and white clouds.
Right.
I think the entire Batman animated series.
Yeah.
You know, when I was writing it, I thought of that. I thought it was, you know, it was going to be more a daylight show. And the goat was a favorite because we used to have a goat dairy. And so I thought having the goat talk like that. Now, they had the idea of the goat showing up, I think, but
Sure.
the idea of having the goat talk like that and to be sort of this character, you know, that I think that sent some people over the lip. They couldn't deal with that. And I just thought that was one of the funniest things in there.
Yeah, it's always the part that we're like, oh, it's time for the goat. Here comes the goat. Yeah.
It's such a weird uncanny valley because it's done in Jim Gordon's office where all the lights are off. It's just dark. He's got those big demonic eyes going on.
The door opens. There's
and then he just starts talking, and then Harvey Bullock comes in and adds to it. And like, that goat ate my donut.
I thought it was a comedy. That's probably the best way I can tell you is that I wrote that as a comedy, and I jumped off of Gerber's, you know, framework that he had, and I think I do remember them saying this, that he did not believe in any true heroes.
Yes, yeah. And Bruce Timm has said that a lot.
I'm not sure about that. I don't think there is anything as a total hero, but in comics I want for there to be sometimes, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I've written some pretty dark stuff in comics. I mean, obviously Jonah Hex is not a standard hero. So I think I probably lean that way. I'm just not as far that way because I think the hero is not something that's perfect, but it's something to aspire to. Yeah. I don't want to aspire down, you know. I want to aspire up.
I've heard it said, good isn't something you are, it's something you do.
Absolutely right. Yeah. It's not what you say, it's what you do, you know, and I've always liked that approach. I've written a lot of shaded characters, a lot of characters that are certainly not perfect characters. My Happy Leonard characters aren't. They're people call them anti-heroes, but I've never understood that term because if you're a hero and you're an anti-hero, what are you? You're the villain. And so I think it just means more realistic heroes that don't have just this noble cause like Superman in 1950s when I first started reading him or saw him on the old television show, which I loved, by the way. I loved all that stuff. I have collections of all those old comics and stuff that I've tried to replace. I had the same thing. My mother, you know, got rid of my comics, like all these people who had them. I had all those early comics, and it was great too. Later on, I knew Julie Schwartz, and I got to talk to him about them creating these comics and how they, you know, went about it. I mean, it's not that I have any real information outside of what other people have, but I grew up seeing his name on those things, and then later I got to know him, and it was fun to talk to him about, you know, the Flash and Green Lantern and so on.
So, with all the ridiculous stuff and critters, was there anything that you submitted into the script or anything that was maybe a little bit like too far for even this episode that had to get cut out that you can remember?
If there was, I don't remember it. That doesn't mean that it didn't. I mean, you have to remember this was in the 90s, you know, and it's been a long time. And also I've written so many different things and enjoyed doing so many different things, but I hold these in high esteem. But I didn't memorize all the moments.
Yeah.
I do know that at one point, what ended up becoming barbecue sauce that they spilled all over the chickens was apparently supposed to be like fryer grease or something. I don't know if that was a script thing or not.
Yeah,
but
that's right. No, that was a script. You're right. Because that's what, you know, in the South, we fry chickens. No, it was. You're right.
And instead, now it just looks like a bunch of blood that they somehow got away with.
And I don't exactly know why barbecue sauce makes it any better.
Right, yeah.
This is not like...
I'm not exactly.
Grease burns, does he come? I don't know.
Right. You're also talking about, you would have loved to see Farmer Brown come back. We talked to Dan Reba. We've talked to him several times now, but the first time we had him on, he was talking about, it being like a favorite episode of his and that he really wanted, in Justice League Unlimited, we have the Cadmus project, which is very shady black ops government agency with all these, really, they have a whole like round table full of the best of the best of military and government officials and all this stuff and
cloning and genetics.
Yeah, and all this. And so, they've got all these weird, Third Reich style experiment stuff going on in the background. And Dan was always like, oh, and of course, Farmer Brown was at the table. And we're like, no, he's not. Like, what? Oh, I really wanted him to be. And all this stuff. He would have fit right in. Yeah.
In the Critters DVD commentary, Bruce Timm is like, God damn it, we should have put him there.
Should have used him, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love all those guys, Paul Dini and Bruce and Michael and, the people the three people I worked with the most. And and Alan Burnett, another great guy.
Oh, absolutely.
The first interview we ever had on our channel was Alan Burnett.
Yeah.
He's a great guy. He has so much to do with this, creating that universe.
Yeah.
I think a lot of Alan and like I said, all those guys. And I think after Red Romance, maybe Tim will let me do any more comics.
I need to read that one.
Just for your knowledge, there was a 2020 comic that took after Batman the Animated Series called The Adventures Continue, and we had Deathstroke, the Teen Titans villain, come in. And there's a moment where they have to escape back to their warehouse or wherever they're in, the bad guys. And there's a Farmer Brown produce truck that they have to take back that they must have stolen from somewhere. But it was just this fun little, Easter egg there.
Fun.
Yeah.
Our next question on Critters is, you've cited H.G. Wells' The Food of the Gods, as well as the films Reptilicus and The Deadly Mantis as inspirations for the episode. How much?
Absolutely, yeah.
How much of that was brought in by you, or was that all kind of present in Gerber's outline already?
I remember that everything got big in his outline. I think I took the tonality of those films, and like Them was in my mind too.
Yeah,
it was one of my favorite old science fiction films. And it's just the idea when we were growing up in the 50s, giant insects, they were always caused by something like an atom bomb or some kind of radiation, and you turn around and goddamn, there's a giant praying mantis, and turn it over a toy bus. But we had a lot of that in when I was growing up. So I'm sure I know that it implanted, and that I was always looking for an excuse to, do that and put it out. So it was the perfect vehicle for me to kind of run amok with that.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I'm curious, because you're a farmer. What do the praying mantises have to do with farming? Or was that just a pool for doing the giant bugs?
They don't have anything to do with farming, but that was part of the experiments. If you could make those insects larger, then you can make other things larger. And a lot of times experiments are done on things like insects and rats. And
while I was listening to the audiobook of Food of the Gods, and once it got to the wasps in there, I was just like, oh, okay, makes sense.
Yeah. And of course, them has all the giant.
Well, that was
was
a big influence on me in that too, because I read that book when I was a kid, and they made a horrible movie out with and Marjo Gointner, I think how you say his name.
Oh yeah.
He had been an evangelist and decided that he would reveal that they were really just pocketing the money and didn't care about God at all. And he became a movie star. Star was probably the wrong word, but he became he did a documentary where they secretly hid cameras and had all these evangelists talking about how they were scamming people. And they were just pretty open about it, And so that kind of gave him some notoriety, and he was then in some of them, a film or two. I don't know how many, but they made a terrible version of that. Very good novel.
Yeah, that tends to happen from time to time. A really good book becomes a really crappy movie. Yeah. And I know we would love to talk about Critters for the next, couple hours, but we're wanting to be sensitive of your time. So we did want to ask you about some of the stuff that you worked on after Batman the Animated Series.
Sure.
You brought up Son of Batman earlier, and you've also written several other Batman novels since then. Did you approach the character of Batman in like, oh, I've worked on Batman the Animated Series, or is it always different per project in your mind?
It's different for project because I approached it very much when I did the first draft was very much like Batman the Animated Series. And I remember that I had some notes from Alan, and they were good notes, but they were trying to find the balance of that particular way they wanted to present Batman in this, this period. And so then I think I went a little bit more, a little broader, a little goofier, a little bit, and we finally just kind of narrowed it down. But I probably had more notes and instruction on that one than I did anything else I had done. And it's because I had read the comic, and I didn't like the aspect that Robin was this kid that was this badass. I had a hard time buying it. I wanted him to be at least in his teens or something like, when I was a kid, I always imagined Robin in his teens. When you look at the old comics, you realize that he wasn't necessarily. But that was kind of one of those, it was a funny thing to bother me, but I had a hard time with that.
Yeah.
And eventually, though, we got there. So, but it was different. It was a different tone. It's just like, I did the 3 Batman the Animated Series. The tone was totally different from Batman and Robin with Critters.
Right.
And the tone was different with Son of Batman. Mm-hmm. It was somewhat like I think it was Robinson who did the comic.
Yeah.
James Robinson.
Grant Morrison.
Oh, yeah,
actually.
yeah.
Grant Morrison. And both of them are very good. I love Grant a lot. But I had trouble with that age thing, not the comic itself. I think the comic was a little bit more realistic in that area, but I think it was the tone that I had a hard time capturing because they had moved on from Batman the Animated Series, and what they were looking for, I had to kind of home in on, like artillery. A little to the left, a little to the right, but I got there. And Alan was, of course, wonderful helping, but he did give me a lot of suggestions on that.
The Son of Batman was part of a larger interlocking set of movies. And so from what I understand, there were usually a couple of them in production at the same time. So I was curious if you found yourself having to juggle any moving parts as far as Alan making plans for these, future DC animated movies that would go on from yours or...
I don't remember Alan saying that to me, but I had the feeling that was part of what the problems were that I had with it.
Sure.
And they weren't big; they were little things. But I think that was it. Is I was unaware of this sort of bigger picture that they were looking at, and I was writing a smaller picture.
And yours was one of the first. So yours didn't necessarily have to, deal with.
You were creating it,
yeah. So I kind of just had to wing it, and that's what I did. But I didn't remember it as fondly as the others, and I saw it again not long ago, and I said, "Damn, this is fun." I had a good time watching it. I enjoyed it.
Of course, it's good. It's written by Joe Lansdale. Don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he's Bruce Timm's favorite author.
He wrote Critters.
But anyway, it was a different experience. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
A different twist on the Al Ghul lineage as well.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Different.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always been an interesting. We just heard recently how the next slate of DC movies is going to adapt those stories with Damian Wayne and all that. That's always just been. It's not something I dislike necessarily, but for the live action movies, it's not something I dislike necessarily, but it's definitely like a very different take on Robin than every other Robin.
I think so too.
Yeah.
For me, there's only the original. There's Dick Grayson, and that's it. He gets to be Nightwing, but doesn't get to be other Robins, Right. The problem I have I'm a DC Comics fan, but the problem I have with them now is it seems like every other month they start all over from the bottom and recreate a whole. Yeah, and I can't keep up with who's who and what's what anymore.
It's gotten to the point
worse
where
than that, I don't want to.
Yeah.
It's gotten to the point where I'm following authors more than I'm following characters.
Right.
Which is
I'm not even doing that, but I haven't been reading comics much at all. One of the problems for me that led me away from reading a lot of my favorite comics was that they were no longer had an end game, or at least an obvious end game. And it's the same way when you have the DC Comics on the CW, they start out wonderful. They were far better at doing that and animation than they were at movies. And then after a little while, they just start. How many times is the Flash going to fight the goddamn Reverse Flash,
Right.
And and it's always and the same character that shows up in different roles after a little while just gets goofy to me. And so I think they have always about 2, some of them 4 great seasons. And then after that, they just recycle. Well, the comics are even worse because they tell you a story, but you have to read so many comics to get the story. And you sometimes cross over with other comics. I know that that's a marketing ploy, but it feels like they're just pouring more and more water into the stories. And I will admit I love the art, but I'm more interested in the story because I'm a writer and I want the story to appeal to me along with the art. And a lot of the times I find that the art overwhelms the story and it's no longer about the story. And it's about how many weird ways we can place the art to look cool, even if it makes no sense as to how the story's told. And so I don't read a lot of comics these days like that. I have been reading a lot of the old Classics Illustrated again, and I read some of the older, collections of comics, but I don't want to live in the past. I want modern stuff, but I don't like a lot of what's going on now because as soon as I get into it, it's like, you know what? We're just going to change that whole universe. Just scrap that shit. We're starting all over,
I just want to give DC a little bit of credit. They have a new thing they've been doing called the Black Label, where they'll do a book that is out of continuity with a writer and artist who's really talented and do kind of just a little standalone.
I love that idea.
Yeah, those have been some of the best books they've put out recently.
Well, the comics, what happened with comics and the reason that they don't sell comics anymore is not only because there's so many other things to distract people, but movies can do better now what comics did. And when we used to read comics, characters could look cool because they could fly, they could do all this stuff. And when they do the movies, they tear through the cardboard wall or what have you. But now special effects have gotten so incredible that the comics just don't impress like they once did because you can do in film what you can do in the comics. The other thing is they weren't a luxury item. It's like books. They've become a luxury item. Used to, you go to the store, you could buy, a gallon of milk and a loaf of bread and buy a paperback. Yeah. And now if you buy the paperback, you can forget the loaf of bread and milk because, it's just, there was never supposed to be, a luxury item. And that's what happened. And I think it happened when this whole collector thing happened in the 90s, even though that went bust, that started it and people rose the price of comics. And now you're not going to get that comic to go down because they have so much invested in just making the company hold up that they have to make more and more money. It's the same thing with hardbacks and paperbacks. Used to, the common person could easily buy a book. Well, now they've got so many other things that, they don't even pornography books don't sell because you can watch it on your internet or on TV, Thank goodness.
Wait, so are you wearing pants right now? We discussed this before the interview.
No, I'm not,
okay,
James,
perfect.
quick, take off the glove.
I've been off the whole time. Yeah. Well, I would like to ask about your work. You some of your short stories were adapted into episodes of the Love, Death, and Robots animated series. How closely were you involved with that, or were those just kind of like, hey, Mr. Lansdale, may we use your tales for our beautiful show?
That's pretty much it. Is Tim Miller contacted me and said they were going to do the 2, and then after that he said, "Can you send me stories of yours for consideration?" And then I think they found one I didn't send. I think that the last one they did wasn't one I sent. I think they came across it somewhere else. Then I said a whole bunch of stuff that they didn't use, and so it really is just stuff Tim comes across and likes and. Or whoever's reading for him. I don't know what all was doing it. Tim's a big fan. I mean, when my daughter went out and I went out and went to Blur Studios and I sat down and talked to him, and he's a man who is well versed in science fiction and science fantasy and those things. I mean, well versed. He's read almost everybody, and we're talking about short stories primarily. And it was nice to sit and talk with somebody that really had a love for the genre, and he wasn't just somebody that had to say we can make a science fiction buck. He wasn't like that at all. I'm sure he's glad to make a buck. Don't get me wrong. But I like him too, and he's straightforward. He's not full of bullshit. And I think he's a very funny guy too, you know. And they were going to do another one of mine that didn't get done. They replaced it with something else. But the guy they had working, I wish I could remember his name now. That he was talking about my story, and I didn't like it. I didn't, you know. And I just loved it because it was just straightforward and honest. They ended up using something else, but I it was hysterical to me, you know. And Blur Studio is a really cool place. They've really got a system there.
Yeah, I've been watching these. There's these videos on YouTube from Corridor Digital. They're VFX artists react. They just sit on a couch and they'll watch some CGI scene from a movie and then do like a review of it essentially. And they have Love, Death, and Robots on. I swear, like every other episode is just, oh, now we're gonna watch these 5 Love, Death, and Robots episodes just because it's such a good. It's a really lovely like. Nothing is out of bounds. Nothing is like, don't do that. Like whatever kind of art you want to do, whatever story you want to do, it's great. I love it.
Yeah, right. I've been watching that show from the start, and I've just been a huge fan of it. And so going through to prepare for this interview, I saw it on your IMDb, and I'm like, oh shit, I need to go back and watch some of those now.
I've only skipped around and watched titles that jumped out at me, so I need to
gotta watch the Joe Lansdale ones.
Yeah. Well, you know, I love animation, and so it was just like, well, you know, Batman obviously and all that, but I like animation in general. I've always been a big fan, and at one point they were going to do stop motion animation on one of mine. I was very excited, and they turned out not to do it. I believe that was the dump that they were going. Yeah, they were going to do that, and I was all excited. But the animation they did was great. Trioscope did an animated a thing I wrote for George R.R. Martin. Howard Waldrop is a writer that's a good friend of George and a very good writer, a Texas writer, lives in Austin. And he had a series of stories that George optioned. And I wrote one of the scripts. Some other writers wrote, adapted the others, but they used Trioscope, who does this specific it's kind of like what these call rotoscope. It's similar. And so they did that piece I wrote, and it won the LA Film Festival short. But that was more animation, and it was just, to me, that was just like candy. I love animation.
Yeah.
We read that you were an executive producer on a film called The Pale Door that you did with your son, Keith Lansdale, who was a writer. So this film's about a group of cowboys who take shelter in a town full of witches and werewolves. So just want to ask, what was the experience like working with your family on a film?
Well, let me put it this way. I was a producer in that by being a producer, they were able to get certain actors to come in. And in fact, their special effect people were also fans of mine. And my son was a co-writer on it. He was one of the writers on it. And he did a script version, with them. He did his own version, and they all, worked it together. So mostly that was my contribution, and the fact that I like weird Westerns. But I didn't, and I read the script, and I said, what you need to do is maybe, get my son to help you work on this. Not because he's my son, because he can write, and he's had a couple of films sold, and we got one right now that if it works right, I'll be directing it. I was supposed to direct it, but we first got to get it made, or get the money to get it made rather. And so that was my involvement, was just mainly I helped them get people they needed to make the film.
It's an important job.
My friend Bill Stage, and and so it was. I was on the set for about 3 or 4 days. I think Keith was there for a little longer than that. So, it was fun to do it. It was done in Oklahoma. They used some little Western town they had out there. I don't know, what it was originally or whatever.
Well, it looks like we are coming to the end of our questions. You just told us that you're working on trying to get in to direct that movie. Are there any other upcoming projects you can tell us about?
Well, I got a new novel called The Donut Legion coming out from Little Brown Holland. And I have a collection of short stories called Things Get Ugly coming out from Tachyon. Yeah, I have some other stuff I can't talk about now that's film work. A few odds and ends and some short stories. And this and that, So I'm always busy. I mean, I think I've written maybe in my life over 60 novels and 40 or 50 short story collections, and I've co-edited and anthologies, or edited or co-edited anthologies. I've written a lot. I wrote, Ridley Scott optioned my novel, The Big Blow. I did a screenplay for that. It's nearly been, going to be filmed several times, and it never happened. And then it was going to be filmed with somebody else's screenplay. That didn't happen. So it was going to be filmed again with my screenplay. That didn't happen. The usual film stuff. David Lynch had it first, and then Ridley Scott had it, and then eventually Ridley Scott's company bought it, so they own it. But it was enough money that I can't really complain. And then I got paid for writing the script.
Yeah.
I mean, I made a fortune off something that never got made.
Yeah,
and that's all.
That's the way. That's the way to live.
American dream.
Well, David Lynch optioned it for 3 years, and I had a deal that nothing counted towards the back end. They didn't make it anyway,
man.
But and I had the same deal with Ridley Scott's company for a few years, and then somebody realized, my God, we're spending a lot of money that we can't recoup because he made this deal that way, and so then they came up with an amount of money they were going to give me more money to re-option it because I decided I was going to leave. So when I didn't do that, they had a clause that's in all these contracts. After they paid a certain amount, they can buy it all. I've done a lot of screenplays, and I've done a lot of comic scripts, and I've done a lot of essays, and I've done a lot of nonfiction. I've been a busy dog.
You've got me hooked on the idea of a David Lynch, Joe Lansdale joint that I really need to see now.
That never happened. No, that never happened. He one of the guys working with him, that had made that option happen and stuff, but it never happened. But it never happened with Ridley Scott either.
Yeah.
So
it's all because of the dark timeline seeping into our universe.
Right,
we talked about earlier.
So I've had a busy career.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to have the Joe Lansdale world opened up to me much more than it was prior to this interview. And also I hope that there's audiobook versions of your upcoming books with you as the narrator, because I think that'd be the best way for me to experience.
There is one coming up, is the Donut Legion. Is that I'm the main narrator, but we've done it as kind of like a play. There's other people performing other parts. My daughter does 2 parts, and she also does professional book reading and stuff she's like all purpose. But they hired both of us to do the book, and that's fun. And then they got other actors in it as well, and so we're hoping that little audio, almost radio play. It's not quite, because it's read directly. Will turn out well. We'll see.
Well, I'm excited for that one. I work right across the street from a bookstore, so once I hit my lunch break tomorrow, I'm going to walk in and pre-order it.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Yeah. Absolutely. It's been so much fun.
I know that if we had the time, I'm sure we would pick your brain on every single shot from Critters.
I didn't mind at all. I was glad to do it.
Yeah.
Legitimately, it's one of my favorite episodes of the entirety of the DC animated universe, to the point where we've just been going out of our way to talk to as many people as we can who have worked on it. Dan Reba's gotten to the point where he's been sending us the character models for all the different little critters, and so we've got all those saved on a hard drive somewhere, and they're so fun.
I remember thinking when I was writing it, they're not going to make this. And I also remember, and I did write some scenarios and one script that didn't get made. I got paid for all of them, but they were DC things. Yeah.
Well, you know what?
What
did you write that didn't get made?
And I guess I can say it now. When I did a Swamp Thing, and at that time they said they were sexual, so the Alan Moore Swamp Thing, one with the underwater city with the vampires, and I adapted that, and they loved it. But as soon as I got it done, there was a new people ahead of the, I don't know if it was DC or the film people, but they didn't want that sexuality that they asked me to put. And so now everybody's got to get back on their pants. It was a different thing. And it wasn't like a pornographic thing, but it was sexual. I wish it had got
I've got those comics
And
on my shelf, and I haven't read them yet. They
got mad at me for mentioning it was be a secret, but when they hired me to do it, nobody mentioned that it was a secret, so I didn't know it was a real secret. It was a secret from me. Yeah.
You've got James's email address now, so if that script is still kicking around somewhere, I would love to read it.
It probably is. You know, most of my stuff is in Texas State Library. Some of it's in A&M, the library there at those particular colleges. So it's probably in there, and it could be in some of my files. I don't know. I lost a lot of things to a flood a few years back, and it wiped out some of my manuscripts and contracts and things of that nature. Which
all the money you got paid from Ridley Scott. All
my money. Yeah. Yeah, I spent that, fuck him.
Okay, now the title is Taking a Horse from Behind and Fuck Ridley Scott.
Yeah, right.
Mounting a horse.
I named the horse Ridley. We're joking, Mr. Scott. We're joking.
Yes. I think that's the perfect spot to leave off, Joe. So thank you so much for talking with us about all this stuff. We'd love to have you back on at some point. I'm sure that we can pick your brain about all sorts of more stuff from these episodes. But tons to work with here. So thank you very much for being on with us.
Yeah, I'll be glad to come back. Y'all take care.
Sweet. All right, you too.
Have a good rest of your night. Yeah.
Intergang is hosted by the Watchtower Database. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for DC Animated Universe videos on a regular basis. This podcast is edited and produced by yours truly, James Strecker. Stay tuned for more new episodes of Intergang every month as we speak with some of your favorite writers, directors, voice actors, and more from the DC Animated Universe and beyond. Available on all your favorite podcast feeds and watchtowerdatabase.com. To support us on Patreon or nab yourself some sick merch, please visit the links in today's show notes. Thank you for supporting the show. Please leave us a 5-star review on your app of choice or leave us a comment on this podcast episode on the Pod Tower on YouTube. It helps tell the algorithm robots, hey, you should show this to more people, and that'd be just swell. Have a wonderful day, and all hail our Lord Darkseid.
Intergang.